All right, Shalom. I want to start out by giving all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Shemi Awashai, Shem Rakakwadash, double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, and Shalom to all the Akim out there pushing the word of sincerity and the truth. This is the Brother Balls off from Great Millstone, Atlanta. I got a lesson going into basically the founding fathers being, all devils. We in the spirit now, of course, the voting spirit. All these jakes are in the hoopla. They're aroused about basically getting new people in office and things of that nature. And really, this whole thing is a deception, man. First off, you Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans votes never matter. You first off, before even that, you didn't even have rights to vote. But now, since you have a little bit of voice, you feel like you're actually integrated with the society, when truly you're segregated. That's why it's been a mass amount of shootings, and nobody regards you blacks, Latinos, and Native Americans. Blood being spilled through the streets. A lot of Latinos have been getting, thrown straight up, thrown like Jazzy Jeff out of the country, thrown from their drawers in the back of their shirt out of the country. There's been all kind of things going on in you Negroes and Latinos, Native Americans, neighborhoods, high taxation. The drug rate is crazy. The crime rate is out of control, and it's all by the hand of this devil, because this so-called white man hates your guts. He created these project buildings, or these project neighborhoods, these ghettos, these hoods. He systematically created them to oppress you. That's why you have a large distinction between urban and suburban. All right, and the white man has these different lavish areas. He'll have health stores where you're drinking smoothies, greens, and healthy foods. And then you'll go to the hood areas. There's nothing but liquor store, gun store, drug store, another drug store, and then you have individuals selling drugs all around you. So by default, you're going to be a product of your environment, and the so-called white man made it systematically where you all you see is death, and that's all you can drink and feed off of is death, and that's why people are in a dead and low, destitute state. And it all started from the origins of these founding fathers, who everybody in the society looks up to. Whenever they think about politics, whenever they think about the society, they always pay credence and great homage to the founding fathers. And the founding fathers were nothing but homosexual masons and devils, man. Starting off with the first father, the father of this country, George Washington. And I have this article what I want to go into of the list of the presidents of the U.S. who owned slaves. And you'll have a Negro that'll see this, and first thing they'll say, well, leave the past with the past. The scriptures speak about how the Lord required that which is past. In order to know the future and know how things going to pan out, you always have to understand what's going on now and what occurred previously, to see what patterns is going to take place in the future. And these devils, when they established this country, how they pushed and propelled this country was pro-slavery. So it's the same conditions and the same things apply unto this day. So it says this is a list of presidents of the U.S. who owned slaves. Slavery in the U.S. was legal from its beginning as a nation. And slavery still exists today. Don't care what a hard-headed nigga say. They'll jump up and they'll speak about Abraham Lincoln, the Emancipation Proclamation. All that was a transference of goods from the Confederate to the Union. All right. You got your social security number. You're working in these factories. It's more industry based. You still have high taxation. You're under your local plantations, which is your jobs. Yeah, your new slave master is your boss. The word boss means master. Manager and employee is a slave master relationship. All right, that's why you have to rush. You have to damn near leap into your clothes and rush to get to the job early. If you're 5 minutes late, the boss wants to penalize you, write you up, damn near fire you. All right, and then after all these different things, you get a paycheck, and right when you get your check, it's taxed federally, It's taxed by the state. All right, and a lot of times they'll compromise your funds through child support and various other things, and then they'll give you this long process of time to actually retire. And the so-called white man aligned the retirement rate with the death rate, so it'll be actually no ability actually to retire for you blacks, Latinos, and Hispanics. So it says, beginning as a nation, having been practiced in British North America from early colonial days. The 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution formally abolished slavery, though the practice effectively ended only after the end of the American Civil War. So, they claim through the 13th Amendment it was the abolition of slavery, but it speaks about even in the amendments how, you know, uh, outside of incarceration. Because after slavery so-called ended, one of the main corporations that got established is the prison systems. And those prison systems they skyrocketed dramatically with blacks and Latinos. All right, that's where you have the three strikes laws. You do three penalties can actually land you in the slammer for life. All right, and they had the crack epidemic. Of course, that was later on, where you could actually get more time through crack than cocaine, because everybody knows that cocaine is a white people's drug, and crack cocaine is a black people's drug, which was actually created by the so-called white man through his science and his laboratories and pushed through to you Negroes, natives, and Latinos neighborhoods to actually smoke that mess and get inebriated, intoxicated, or really high off of, and get caught with the substance to get lammed in the slammer to actually push up the prison rates, and then you work for basically crumbs in the prison, 13 cents an hour, 15 cents an hour. That's why another term for the prison is known as the chain gang. All right, and this all links up with biblical prophecy. All right, about the devil actually putting us in these institutions, actually breaking us down and not allowing us any freedom. Though the practice effectively ended only after the end of the American Civil War, in total, 12 presidents owned slaves at some point in their lives, 8 of whom owned slaves while serving as president. And I'm basically going to jump to the point. They're going to go through the 12, but they have the list of the 12 right here, and I'm going to read a little bit on it, starting with George Washington. George Washington. Washington was a major slaveholder before, during, and after his presidency. His will freed his slaves pending the death of his widow, though she freed his slaves within a year of his death. And that's how the devil would do. You're going to free a slave during a year of his death, within a year of his death. Obviously, she saw that he was sick, he was lethargic, he wasn't even worthy of actually servicing them anymore, so they just basically gave him the freedom of death, the freedom to let him go. But truthfully speaking, they knew that he was going to die within months. You can look at somebody and see if they're in a healthy state or an unhealthy state. And those slaves, when they were on those plantations, and if I'm not mistaken, I forget the Mount Vernon, which was George Washington's major house. Those you'll look at these different slave houses, and those different slaves was lethargic as hell, man. They were malnourished. They were being beat constantly. They were being stressed out. They weren't being fed with the proper nutrients. And then you'll have a nigga say, well, they got the three. It's a document that speaks about George Washington feeding his slaves 4 times a day. Out of hell with that, man. Was they getting necessary herbs? All the day they was working constantly. Were they getting the Sabbath days off? Were they following the dietary law? They were eating pork during that time. They were being force fed, basically leftover meals. And you'll watch that in these different movies like Good Bone Uncle Tom, where it'll be a round table of devils, basically politicking, and they're throwing fish bones under the table, chicken bones under the table, and the Negro little Negro boys and Negro girls are under the table actually eating the bone marrow, man, like animals. eating the scraps at the table. And that's how the devil gets down. That's how your founding fathers get down. All right, continuing on. Thomas Jefferson. Most historians believe Jefferson fathered multiple children with his three-fourth white slaves, Sally Hernings, the half-sister of his late wife, Martha Wales Skelton. See Thomas Jefferson and slavery for more details. And if brothers, of course, want to read it, you could get the time. I'm gonna read James Madison. And if brothers want to go through, the rest, of course, you got the Indian killer himself, Andrew Jackson, James Monroe, Martin Van Buren, William Henry Harrison, John Tyler, James K. Pollock, Zachary Taylor, Andrew Johnson, and Ulysses S. Grant. And they have the numbers of slaves that they actually own. George Washington, 317. Look at Thomas Jefferson, 600 plus. All right. James Madison, 100 plus, 75, 200, 1, 11, 70, 25, 158, and 1. And I'm going to read about James Madison. Madison proposed the three-fourths compromise, which counted slaves as three-fifths of a person for the purpose of taxation and legislative representation. So during the time of Madison, he put slaves as three-fourths of a person, not for the fact that they actually felt like they were even three-fifths, but it was for the purpose of actually taxing slaves. So you have in 2018 us working these jobs, whether you're in a so-called white collar work, blue collar work, pink collar work, these different forms of work, and majority of us are, of course, blue collar workers. We at the bottom of the totem pole. The only reason why we actually have so-called integrational rights to work beside a so-called white man or a Vietnamese individual, a Gook, any a Hamite, a African, is due to the fact that they want to tax all of us. All right, you got to think even in 2018 how segregation would look in these days. That means you would have to segregate the Vietnamese, give them their own quarters, segregate the Latinos, the blacks, so on and so forth. You know how hard that would possibly be, and how America would look at globally to even actually try to push that type of vibration. And that's the reason why these representatives, these founding fathers, these presidents, these individuals that's in leading positions of office actually integrated all people together is because of taxation, man. It all goes by tribute, having all these individuals collectively tributaries, because they don't give a hell about no Vietnamese individual living in this country. They don't care about their rights. They don't care about their health. They don't care about you blacks' health. They don't care about you Latinos. Hell, the so-called white men, the elites of these white people don't even give a hell about the typical poor white trash. Why should they? They're all about establishing and elevating their enterprise, even if it's at the cost of their own people. These devils, these Rothschilds, these Rockefellers, they all know that sacrifices have to be made for enterprises and establishments to push for the longevity. And that's why you have something known as, of course, brothers are familiar with it, the Georgia Guidestones. The Georgia Guidestones speaks about keeping the population at roughly 500 million, and that means that there's going to be a lot of people cut off, including whites. So continuing on, it says he did not free his slaves in his will. Paul Jennings, one of Madison's slaves, served him during his presidency and later published the first memoir of life in the White House. All right, and even the White House itself, everybody glorifies the White House like it's just the beacon of positivity, purity. That White House is founded upon blood. First off, it was a so-called black man that actually created the blueprint to build the White House, and there was all kind of treachery going on in that White House. The top devils, the top high echelon wicked devils, these slave masters, amongst more foul pedophiles, masons, witches, warlocks, all actually resided in those White Houses. All right, so what are you Negroes so in a frenzy about with this voting thing, man? Your vote doesn't matter. Hell, a lot of people say the electoral votes matter. Truthfully speaking, they're not even electing. These devils are chosen. All right, that's why you have individuals that actually do their research And all these presidents are actually established, and they're all related one way or another. You know, they're all actually you know relatives because Esau deals with a bloodline. The Most High deals with a bloodline, and this white man deals with a bloodline. This is a monarchy. It's a dynasty. All right, where one family member dies, they're gonna keep this blood in house. They're not gonna actually have individuals, outsiders, to actually sit upon the throne. All right, so this is basically this echoes the same sentiment as the previous article I read about the evils of the founding fathers. I'm just probably gonna read possibly just this one, and if brothers want to go, read it in the meantime, just to get a little bit more info out of it, do so. This is under Thomas Jefferson. It says, besides his personal brilliance, one of the things that set Jefferson apart from his peers was his colossal hypocrisy. It says colossal hypocrisy. That's what you devils are. You colossally hypocritical. You're not just your typical, devil that's just lying, petty theft. These devils are stealing billions, man. They ain't taking one hand out of the cookie jar. They want the whole cookie jar with the glass, man. That's why scriptures speak about how they oppress a man in his heritage. But these same devils are pro-Zionism. They are funding the Jesuits, the different Masons, the Illuminati, these secret societies. They're pro-sex trafficking, gun trafficking, illegal drug trade. And that's why these different countries with established drugs, drug enterprises are basically protected by the U.S. government. And the U.S. government is the foulest government to ever arise from the planet Earth. These are the same devils that pushed out syphilis through the Tuskegee experiment, syphilis in Guatemala, syphilis all throughout these different states, the Panama deception, destroying the Latinos' land, the natives' land, amongst various other things, man. And the thrivance of all this bloodshed and witchcraft still is perpetuated and is still living and breathing unto this day. So it says this makes him by far the easiest founding father to pick on, but he's also also the one who most deserves it. A study in contrast and a lifetime proponent of liberty, he nonetheless kept slaves. At the time of his death, Jefferson owned more than 100 human beings. He could have freed them during his life, but he was adverse, which the word adverse goes into the word adversary, which means Satan. These devils is Satan, and whoever wrote this document, he has a pretty, good understanding of who the devil is, not actually literally, but in context, because he actually chooses his words wisely. So it says, was averse to taking any actions that might crash his lifestyle. The debts he left to his heirs guaranteed that his slaves would stay slaves. And that's the same thing now. We are debt slaves. When we work these minimum wage jobs for $13 an hour, $14 an hour, $10 an hour, is known as wage slavery. That's why anybody that gets paid by the hour, you're a debt slave. And you will never, when you're getting paid by the hour, actually have enough money to actually make it in the society. It's a big gaping hole between the rich and the poor. The average black man, the middle class black man, is basically poor white trash. All right, and the average middle class is basically to a black man, so-called black man, is filthy rich, because the so-called white men established it where we're 400 years behind, and we'll never get that leverage to catch back up. That's why we have to be freed from this captivity. So it says he preached frugality and moderation to others and to the country. In his personal life, he squandered a fortune on fine wine and books, money he didn't have. He built one of the most extensive wine cellars in America, along with one of the largest libraries. Later in life, when he could no longer ignore the baying of his creditors, who are now taking aggressive legal action against him, Jefferson was forced to sell his library. Jefferson took the money he received, made token payments to his creditors, and spent the rest on books. So this is just one example of this so-called white man through his fraudulent and wicked activity, dodging a bullet, time and time again, being working in deception, and trickery, subtlety, and though any wicked any wicked characteristic when you think about it, any wicked definition, it all revolves around you white people, man. Stealing lands, all right, taking heritages, pushing out legislation to oppress nations, you know,